Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR Newstalk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
The killing of a top Iranian official by the U.S., followed by Iranian missile strikes in Iraq. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Over the last week, the United States and Iran has faced off in Iraq. It began with the killing of top Iranian military leader General Soleimani by the United States. And just this week, the Iranians struck back with missile attacks on two military bases with U.S. forces in Iraq. Now it appears both nations have stepped back from a major confrontation, but the future is still uncertain. With us in the studio this morning is Mukhtar Khan. He's an author as well as professor of political science, international relations at the University of Delaware. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Don.
So what is your overall sense, first of all, as to where we are in terms of this confrontation? It looks as if people are scaling back. Certainly the Iranians seem to be doing that. The president seems to also be doing the similar thing. Do you think we are at this point?
Well, I think as far as the crisis is concerned, it has de-escalated in the sense that it is not going to have the same sense of urgency that we witnessed in the media the last 2-3 days. But I don't think that the issues are going away. So the probability, the fear that people were raising about, this is going to lead to a military confrontation between Iran and the U.S., a war with Iran. Some people even went to the extent of saying this is the beginning of the Third World War. But I think all of those are exaggerated. Iran is a very ambitious power, but its capabilities do not match its power, its ambitions. So Iran is, I don't think, going to take on the U.S. In a military confrontation. A few years ago, there was one confrontation in which the United States practically devastated Iranian Navy. And Iran doesn't even have an air force. So for it to, with a very weak economy, I don't think there is a contest there. But Iran has lots of assets, such as proxies in various Middle Eastern countries, a network of intelligence, and asymmetrical warriors that it can summon. And so it is quite possible that while Iran may not confront the U.S. militarily, it may continue to hurt U.S. interests, U.S. assets, and U.S. allies in the region wherever and whenever it can. And now it has a greater incentive to do that because while in public, Trump actually allowed Iran to save face. But they would like to send a message to the U.S. that you can't keep doing this to us, and there is a cost to it. And I think we will eventually see some kind of retaliation from Iran. But the end game for President Trump essentially is a diplomatic solution. He wants a better deal than what President Obama was able to get. So whatever these skirmishes are all about, it's very clear that Trump wants to sit down with the Iranians and basically get a better deal.
The president responds in part to a justification for the actions he's taken by looking back at history. That is to say, talking about the Iranians seizing vessels, the Iranian sparing attacks on the Saudi oil fields, the U.S. drone that was shot down. We're getting kind of this pushback, as it were, by Iran as it faces these increasing sanctions and the U.S. policy. How does one explain those particular events? Are they as collective as, for instance, the president would have us believe, that they are part of a larger strategy or a larger pushback, or are they just individual incidents?
Well, the U.S. and Iran have been doing this to each other for several years now. We have hacked into their nuclear facilities. We have released viruses into their systems. There are rumors that even their nuclear scientists have been assassinated either by the U.S. or by Israel. So both sides have been, basically taking pot shots at each other. But Iran, I think, went too far when it hit the Saudi refineries. And then, of course, a contractor was killed, and then Iran unleashed its proxies on U.S. embassy. So those things, I think, went a bit too far, and it gave the Trump administration an opportunity to send the message to Iran that we are not the previous administrations, we are willing to escalate. And so killing of Soleimani was really kind of a game changer, a step up to basically saying, well, let's change the nature of the game. Can Iran play that game? I mean, is Iran now capable of assassinating America's chief of staff in Canada or somewhere else, right? Iran can't match that. So I think the message that the Trump administration probably has sent to Iran is that, look, not only are we willing to put new sanctions, put maximum pressure, but we are also willing to wield the stick in a way that hasn't been done in the past. So that message is very clear to the Iranians. And I think Iran's retaliation acknowledged that. I mean, their retaliation was designed to cause minimum damage. So basically, they fired missiles in the wrong direction. Either they have really bad targeting technology or they deliberately missed their targets. Because they did not want to give Trump another opportunity to hit some major targets in Iran itself. So far the battle is happening outside Iran, and we haven't hit Iran directly, publicly, ever before, and I don't think the Iranians would like to open that door for the United States. Then everybody else in the future will be doing that. Having said all that, I think that the Trump administration have mishandled the diplomacy as well as the selling of the event at home. In fact, one of their biggest supporters, Tucker Carlson, on Fox News, was their biggest critique, and Trump actually said that after listening to Carlson, he kind of reformulated his position. I think we should rename Fox News as a policy planning cell rather than the State Department. But I have a feeling that this is a beginning of a new direction in U.S.-Iranian relations. It remains to be seen, but it also has made it very clear that now we are not confronting Iran with, P5+1. We are alone internationally, and domestically also right now there is not much support. The last survey that I saw suggested that only 25% Americans were interested in a military confrontation with Iran. Over 75% are okay with sanctions.
How significant was Soleimani in terms of his record, in terms of what he did, and what kind of loss do you think that is for the regime?
Well, Soleimani, in terms of his status, was head of one of the divisions, the Quds division, part of the IRGC. He's a four-star general. He was not even the highest military ranking officer. However, over the last few years, he had kind of developed his own profile. He was taking selfies with his proxies. There was a lot of media attention being paid to him. And there were rumors that the Supreme Commander Khamenei saw him as his son. When he was leading his funeral prayers, he cried. And he cried so much that he was not able to recite the Quran properly. So there are these messages that he was a very important hero of the country. There were also rumors that after his military career, perhaps he would be running for president of Iran. So all of that hype was being built. But he is also quite a hated character. Sunnis, Syrians, etc. hate him. It is because of him and he built a lot of Iranian proxies in the Gulf, like Hezbollah and other Shia militias, and they were instrumental in preserving and saving Assad's regime in Syria, and they have committed a lot of atrocities against those who oppose Assad. So there's a lot of blood on his hands. He has killed a lot of Iraqis and Syrians, and even some of his creations have been creating a lot of havoc in places like Yemen and Lebanon, so on and so forth. So he has a lot of blood on his hands. By some estimates, he has killed anywhere between 1,100 to 1,700 Americans. So all those IEDs, etc., technology which were being used by terrorists in Iraq are rumored to have come from IRGC and him. He has also helped the Taliban in some ways. So there is this perception that he was like the mastermind of geopolitics in the region. But you must understand that he is not like Baghdadi or bin Laden. Killing him is not going to dent the institution. He could have retired next year and run for president. so someone else is going to take his position. And so in that sense, he didn't make Iranian foreign policy. He only executed it in a particular region. So I don't think the regime's policies are going to change because Soleimani is dead. And I don't think killing him has eliminated the institutional capacity of IRGC, the Republican Guards. So in that sense, from a tactical and strategic perspective, I don't think we have gained significantly. The assassination has symbolic value, no doubt, and some of them is positive and some of it is negative.
Someone suggested, I heard the other day, that one of the reasons why Soleimani and people like him developed various proxies around the region was in the aftermath of the Iran-Iraq War, the original one, the 1980s, that the Iranian leadership said, we can't allow this to happen again, that we need other forces outside in order to create pressure. Do you think that's true in terms of projecting Iranian influence and staving off, perhaps?
I think that the sanctions on Iran, the economic sanctions, and its inability to raise more and more money. Like right now, 90% of Iran's oil has been withdrawn from the market. So Iran is not able to get revenues for it. Iran, I think, is a net importer of petroleum right now because it's not able to sell, and so it's buying refined oil from elsewhere. But Iran also is not able to develop its military technology or buy military technology like, say, Saudi Arabia does. So Iran has to either develop indigenous capabilities. So it has invested in ballistic technology and has some missile capability, but it does not have a massive air force or a massive navy, which it could have had if all these sanctions were not in place. So it would have had a powerful military. It probably would have won the Iran-Iraq war if that had happened. So they realized that they need to develop a punitive capacity to hurt those powerful countries like Israel and the United States, which may attack it. So I think that the success of Hezbollah, especially in the war with Israel in 2007, where this militia of 5,000 people really stood up to the most powerful nation in the region, and fought it toe-to-toe for about a month like a military, I think that probably triggered and said, oh, wow, this is tremendous. With very little financial investment, we can develop proxies which give us two things. One, they give us reach way beyond our borders. So we can operate these. We can create proxies in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon. But not only that, it also gives Iran a bit of a deniability. You know, they can always say, we never ordered this, Hezbollah did it on its own, or this particular militia or did it on its own. So it becomes a very useful tool. It is not very different from the terrorist groups that Pakistan has used, both towards Kashmir or Afghanistan. You have assets which can be deployed to do things beyond your borders, while also giving you some deniability.
So what does this all mean in terms of the Iranian presence in Iraq as well as the U.S. presence? We had obviously the parliament passing a non-binding resolution calling for foreign forces to withdraw, particularly the United States, I guess, in this particular case. What does this do in terms of particularly of the Iranian influence and presence in Iraq as well as the official U.S. presence?
Well, I don't have any evidence, but I suspect that one of the reasons why Trump has de-escalated is because of the step that the Iraqi parliament took. If they had passed a binding resolution, then United States military presence, at least according to international law, would have been illegal in Iraq. And that would have been a big blow to the U.S., not only in its war against ISIS, but also a U.S. military presence in Iraq is a deterrence to Iran, and it is also some comforting to allies like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So the United States wishes to continue to have some military presence in Iraq. We have invested nearly $2 trillion in the Iraq project, but the fact is, if in the last few days we see that Iraq seems to be at least politically more aligned with Iran than with the United States. And that raises the question as to what is the political and strategic value of the kind of wars we have fought in the Middle East lately. and raises the issue that maybe we need to rethink our presence in the Middle East more fundamentally.
Do you think that this allows the Iranians to perhaps have a greater amount of influence in Iraq? When I think about, for instance, the U.S. has only a very small portion of troops there, and it seems as if the Iranians' influence has certainly grown over the years. On the other hand, we certainly have had some pushback. We saw some protests against Iranian presence. So the Iraqis themselves are not necessarily crazy about the Iranians being there, even though they're both, for all intents and purposes, are Shiite.
Well, it is a bit premature, but I think in the long run, Iraq will be to Iran what Europe has been to the U.S.
And so?
With that, we have tremendous influence in Europe, while there is anti-Americanism in Europe. Mm-hmm. Right? The public may protest, but the governments will be in line. So we will see the same thing. There will be protests in the public against Iran, but the governments of Iraq will potentially, on most important issues, in the long run, align with Iran. Iran's influence on Iraq is more through its soft power. Iraq is a Shia majority state. Iran is a Shia majority, a Shia state, nearly 95% plus. Some of the most important religious sites are in Iraq, so there is going to be a lot of tourism, religious tourism between Iran and Iraq, people going to Home in Iran, going to Najaf in Iraq. So in that sense, those ties, which were kind of blocked by Sunni authoritarianism, has disappeared. You know, in 2003, a lot of historians were saying that for centuries, Sunnis have held on to Baghdad and Shias have tried to get it, and we helped reverse this balance of power in that part of the Arab world. So the United States will have to acknowledge that in the long run, Iran will have tremendous cultural and political influence in most of the countries in the region which have significant Shia populations. And that is something that we have never, our foreign policy does not acknowledge the capacities which are, potentialities which are natural to the region for countries like Iran and sometimes even China and Russia, and we go against it. And that is where we fail. And I think that the United States' image in the Middle East is nothing to crow about, really. Yes, there are people who hate Iran, but they also hate the United States. So,
what does this mean all in terms of, for ISIS, in terms of their survival, what's in the region?
Well, you must see, one of the things that I don't think Americans have realized is that one of Soleimani's shall we say, achievements was his defeating ISIS on the ground. It was the Shia militias. The Iraqi army that we trained and built just ran away from Mosul, right, without a fight. The people who really fought on the ground were the Shia militias and the Kurdish militias. Turkey didn't fight ISIS directly. Neither did the Iraqi military play a better role, but the Iranian militias. It's like, Russians say that we always forget the role that Russia played in defeating Germany in World War II. And similarly, we don't acknowledge the role that Iran has played in defeating ISIS, both in Iraq and Syria. Yes, they also in the process ended up preserving and saving the Assad regime, which will continue to raise tensions in the region. But I don't think this means that Iran is going to be exercising lesser influence in Iraq. So I think that all the operations that Soleimani was running will be run. Now it just depends on how competent the next guy really is. But I think the infrastructure, the architecture of proxy security that Soleimani had built remains in place. We have not destroyed that, nor have we reduced its legitimacy. In fact, right now, because of the way we dealt with Soleimani, we have united the Iranian population behind the regime, made the regime more secure. There was a chance that this regime could have been toppled by its own people, given the nature of the economy and the sufferings as a result of the additional sanctions that we had posed. But there is also now anger among the Iraqi ruling elite against the United States, and more countries are going to question U.S. military presence there.
Do you think that this means an end to ISIS? That once the U.S. pulls out, and obviously the Iranians are not crazy about them, and they've, as you said, been fighting them both in Iraq and Syria.
Syria, the ISIS exploded for 2 or 3 reasons. One, because there was a power vacuum in that region. And so they were able to quickly grab a lot of land. And then the fact that they were able to have these military victories was the source of attraction and appeal, and so they were able to recruit. But now they don't look like a winning organization. They are on the defense, they're on the run, they are defeated, their leaders have been killed. So I don't think they have any attraction and recruitment appeal. So the recruitment is down, their capacity to continue to remain in the news is down. If you read the 2017 national security document produced by the White House, I wonder whether the White House itself has read it, but Mattis and the previous national security advisor may have put it together. We clear acknowledgement that we are back to geopolitics. We have moved away from the global war on terror and gone to old-fashioned geopolitics. We are now looking not at non-state actors as a major threat, but we are looking at regional powers and global powers as threats. So it's Russia and China on the global sphere, China as an economic challenge, Russia as a security threat on the global level, and potential nuclear powers like North Korea and Iran as regional threats. So we are back to old-fashioned geopolitics, which is itself an acknowledgement that Al-Qaeda and ISIS has lost their ability to threaten the United States, at least.
Where does it, for instance, leave the Sunnis, say, for instance, in Iraq?
Well, the Sunnis are going to be like the Kurds in Syria and Iraq. They are going to be discriminated against. They are getting a taste of their own medicine, so to speak, in Iraq. They had an opportunity to become part of the democratic process. They themselves boycotted the constitutional process of Iraq very early on. But the job in terms of what the United States did was still incomplete, in the sense that I think that if Iraq ultimately wants to become a more stable democracy, then it will have to rejig its constitution and give more room and more opportunities, both economic and political, to its Sunni minority. Otherwise, it will continue to radicalize its own population, or at least make them feel disenchanted.
Where does this lead Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia must, I think the leadership of Saudi Arabia must have spent sleepless nights because if Iranian missiles can't hit Los Angeles and New York, but they certainly can hit Riyadh and Jeddah. So if there was a military confrontation, I can tell you that Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Saudi targets, oil refineries, would have been one of the earliest targets that Iran would hit. Because with each passing moment, we would be degrading their assets, right? We would destroy their ability to shoot missiles, maybe their radar systems, etc. So if I was an Iranian general, the first thing I would do is hit as many things as I can before the U.S. destroys my capacity to hit. And so, yes, it makes the Saudi position very precarious. But something interesting has happened. Just as in the second term of Obama, the Saudis lost confidence in the U.S., they're already losing confidence in the United States right now. They are not sure of the U.S. After the Khashoggi affair. So the first 2 years of the Trump administration was like a honeymoon. Now they are both looking for divorce lawyers, I think. So Saudi Arabia should be feeling very insecure. In fact, there are rumors that at the behest of the United States, General Soleimani was brought to Iraq in order to initiate some kind of a de-escalation dialogue with the Saudis. And the Iraqis didn't know that the U.S. was going to assassinate him. Otherwise, they would not have shared that intelligence. But I also think that even the U.S. didn't know. I think this is a spur-of-the-moment decision made by the president for, to a great extent, domestic politics. So he's going to run for office now saying, Obama killed bin Laden, but I got Baghdadi and Soleimani. Yes, 2 for 1.
So where does this leave the region in terms of stability?
Well, the region is, I don't think
Keep it
this
all.
makes the region more stable at all. In fact, a few years ago, a new literature started appearing on failed states. I think we need to start looking at failed regions, and I think the Middle East has become, especially the Arab Middle East, not so much of the North Africa, but the proper Middle East has become a failed region, badly governed, insecure, at war with each other. It's sometimes very difficult to see who is not fighting whom. Now with the further aggressive entry of Turkey, not just in Syria, but also in Libya, and the inability, there was lots of attempts by Saudi Arabia to establish the Sunni army and stuff, and that failed. And then now Erdogan and Mahathir tried to establish an alternative collective security group that met late December in Malaysia. And then Imran Khan, who was supposed to be part of it, bailed out because the Saudis threatened to, I guess, cut economic aid to Pakistan. So there are lots of divisions in the region, and they are not able to act collectively, nor are they able to act coherently. So yes, we will see more instability. And the U.S., unfortunately, in the past acted as a stabilizing force, but nowadays the U.S. is also a destabilizing force in the region. There is nobody who's stabilizing the region. Everybody is adding to the mess.
We've been speaking with Muqtada Khan. He is an author and also a professor of political science and international relations at the University of Delaware. Appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Production and audio engineering by Chris Ranck. Hosted by Don Rush. For podcasts, visit delmarvapublicradio.net or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. You can also watch Delmarva Today on PAC 14 by tuning into Comcast Channel 14 or youtube.com/PAC 14.